My name is Douglas Starr. I'm a professor of science journalism at Boston University and co-director of the graduate program in science journalism. And we teach young journalists who have a strong science background how to report and analyze issues that involve science, medicine, public health, and the environment, issues that really need to be taken seriously and dealt with in a perceptive way. In addition to doing that, I'm a writer, and I've written a couple of books in the field of medicine, medical history, and the book we're talking about today is The Killer of Little Shepherds. And it tells the true story of the people who invented forensic science at the turn of the century and the first serial killer who was brought to justice using scientific techniques. Well, I was always interested in medicine, and what especially interests me in science and medical writing isn't the nerdy stuff about a particular thing, but these larger issues of social justice and where does science affect how people perceive things and sort of the scientific pursuits of humanity. So I had previously done a book which was one of these mammoth histories of a scientific enterprise. In this case, it was blood. How blood has been seen through the ages, from the time of mysticism, through the first transfusions, through the use in the war, up to the AIDS epidemic. And that put me on to this whole notion, again, of science and justice. And one day I was in the basement of Harvard Medical School looking through journals, and I came upon something that mentioned the case of Joseph Vacher and the great forensic scientist Alexandre Lacassagne. And I realized this could have the making of a book. So the protagonist of the book is Dr. Alexandre Lacassagne from Lyon, France, who I'm afraid has almost been lost to history. And when I started looking into this case, I started understanding what a remarkable man he was. He lived in Lyon. He could have been anything. He was a great scientist. He was a great doctor. He was a great writer. He understood the arts. But he picked on forensic science because he felt that science could really serve the cause of justice. So he, over the course of his lifetime, developed with his colleagues many of the techniques we now know. He figured out ballistic testing of bullets. He figured out the angle of wounds. They figured out body position, blood spatter evidence, pretty much everything except DNA and fingerprints. And he and his colleagues really set the stage for CSI as we know it today. They knew how to match the wound to the weapon, to the type of bullet. They were extraordinary in what they could do. They analyzed footprints in a way that we could barely imagine, using plaster of Paris and gels to get footprint imprints, and even salt solutions to get footprints from the snow. Fingerprints came a little bit later. But really, when you think of it, they had almost everything we did except for DNA. Now, what they did with Vacher, it was a dual effort. First, there was an inspector named Vacher, who was the first to see a pattern in the crimes. People had very bad communication in those days, and Vacher would commit a murder in one district. He could walk 20 miles in a day and be in another district where nobody ever heard of him. This Inspector Vacher began to see a pattern, and he sent telegrams out to all the districts of France, saying, has anybody had this kind of a murder, and if so, send me a description of the culprit. And he began to create what was the first criminal profile ever done. Lacassagne moved Vacher to Lyon for 3 months, where for 3 months he visited him every day, trying to psych him out, trying to get the truth out of him because he didn't believe he was crazy. He felt he was malingering, and what he finally did was he then analyzed all of the murders and used autopsical drawings to come up with an MO. And in doing this over a period of months, he realized that Vacher wasn't acting like a crazed animal on impulse like he claimed. He wasn't forgetting what he did, but these murders were planned. The method was very effective. The escape was very effective. And he was able to take that evidence to court and show that he was not insane. So it was a combination of brilliant psychological police work, the first criminal profile, very modern and humane interviewing, and then finally Lacassagne coming in with a piece that really condemned him, the modern analysis of autopsies to see what was really the pattern in the killing. And that combination of extremely modern techniques is what put the guy away. I was surprised at how like our own time the turn of the century was. There is something about the 1890s that fascinates all of us. In a way, it was the end of an old age, an era that we think was more courtly, more genteel. There were machines with moving parts as opposed to digital machines. The art world was flourishing. In a time, it was the birth of modern times. Pasteur had discovered germ theory. Modern neurology was born. Modern chemistry was born. Modern forensics was formed. It was really the birth of the modern era. And what's amazing about it compared to our own times was at the same time, it was the birth of the middle class. It was the invention of the department store, the popularity of the bicycle, all these wonderful things. People could really enjoy life. And at the same time, just like our own era, there was this sense of dread. There was the sense of, we're doing fine, but there's a whole class of people who are not doing fine. And what happens if they get tired of being that way? And there were these rumblings from the underclass, and there was an international terrorist movement. We call it Al-Qaeda. In those days, it was anarchism. And they were setting off bombs and assassinating presidents. So you had a real interesting situation that, although 100 years removed, was a period very much like our own, both in the technologies, in the hopes of people, and in their fears.